Welcome back to the Calvary Institute Systematic Theology 2 class. My name is Phil. I serve as one of the pastor elders here, and I just want to first and foremost tell you how glad we are to have you and welcome you to the class. So we are in the middle of, or part 2 of the Doctrine of the Church, which is the 8th week of our class. In this second part of Doctrine of the Church, we're going to cover 5 major topics. There's going to be 5 sessions we'll get into. Those topics are church governance. We'll talk about, and they'll talk about there probably a little bit of time, and then we'll spend some time talking about the means of grace, baptism, the Lord's Supper, and worship. We'll cover all 5 of those in week 8. Now, for this session, we'll be dealing specifically with the doctrine of church governance. So let's kick off that discussion talking about the church officers. What is a church officer as seen in Scripture? Well, the definition is a church officer is someone who has been publicly recognized as having the right and responsibility to perform certain functions for the benefit of the church. Now in Scripture, we see 3 different offices lined out. One of those offices we see was an office that only was around in Jesus' time, early church, and then the other 2 offices continue on into today as well. So the first of the offices is the apostle. And that's the one limited to the early church, and the offices of elder and deacon are around today. So let's first look at the office of the apostle. So we do see some use of the word apostle in the Scriptures to indicate a messenger, right? That is one way the word apostle is used. Now, the actual office of apostle is much more what we see when the word apostle is used in the Scriptures. And this refers to a very special office. These are, we call them the big A, but this is the apostles of Jesus Christ. Now, apostles of Jesus Christ were those who fulfilled 2 specific requirements. The first of those is that apostles had to have been eyewitnesses to the resurrection by seeing Jesus with their own eyes. The second requirement is that they had to have been commissioned by Jesus personally as his apostles. These are men who were called forth by Jesus personally to his work. The known apostles in Scripture that we know of, or the ones that we know are Paul and the original 11 with Matthias, who replaced Judas after Judas betrayed Jesus. We also see evidence in Acts and Galatians that James, the brother of James, the brother of Jesus, James, the brother of Jesus, and Barnabas were also apostles. But beyond those 15, there is no sufficient evidence that any other apostle ever existed. Now, in fact, there is evidence in 1 Corinthians 15, 5-9 that Paul was the last of the apostles because he was the last to see Jesus. Remember, they had to have seen Jesus and been sent forth by Jesus to the work. So because of this, we today can be assured that no apostles were alive after the first century. Now, the first of the continuing offices in the church that still exists today is that of the elder. When we survey the New Testament, we see that the consistent pattern in the New Testament churches was to have a plurality of elders governing the church. One of many examples of this is Acts 14:23. And when they had appointed elders, the word plural there, from among them in every church. There's not one scripture that indicates for us that there was a single elder over any church. Other names for elders in the New Testament are overseer, bishop, and pastor. The Greek word for pastor is poimen, which is also translated shepherd and is the main function of the elder. All the primary functions of the elder, pastor, overseer, bishop is to govern, to rule the church as shepherds, as well as teach the people of God. Now, this is not to be done in a domineering fashion, but rather, as 1 Peter 5:2-3 says, shepherd the flock of God that is among you, exercising oversight, but not under compulsion, but willingly as God would have you, not for shameful gain, but eagerly, not domineering over those in your charge, but being examples to the flock. At Calvary, the elders have 4 primary responsibilities: to know, which is also to love, to feed, which is to teach, to lead, which is the part of governing the church, and to protect, and this is partly to teach right doctrine, but also to know right doctrine themselves, be enabled so that the elders can refute falsehood, to refute false doctrine. Elders, as we like to say, elders are to know, feed, lead, and protect the flock in their charge. Everything that the elder do, especially at Calvary, everything that the elders do is shaped by those four main tenets. Now, the main qualifications for elders are listed in two places. They're listed in 1 Timothy 3, 2-7, and Titus 1, 6-9. Elders are to be above reproach, the husband of one wife, sober-minded, self-controlled, respectable, hospitable, able to teach, not a drunkard, not violent, but gentle, not quarrelsome, not a lover of money, but must manage his own household well, must not be a recent convert, and he must be well thought of by outsiders, those outside the church. Now, it's important for us to look at those qualifications and carefully look at those, because Paul here combines requirements concerning character traits and heart attitudes with requirements that cannot be fulfilled in a short time, but will only become evident over a long period of several years of faithful Christian living. And these are also generally contrary to worldly achievement as well. Lastly, the process of selecting elders must not be a rushed process or based on hasty decision. Time needs to be taken. So selection of elders should be years, multiple years in the making, in the process. Time and patience is truly key. Now, the second continuing office of the church is that of the deacon. The qualifications for this are very similar to that of the elder, so we're not going to repeat many of them, but there are some notable exceptions between the two offices, and that's particularly that of governing and teaching. It is important to note that the New Testament does not require that deacons be able to teach Scripture or sound doctrine, or that they have ruling authority over the church. The word deacon is translated from the Greek word diakonos, which means servant. The office of deacon was established in Acts 6 by a congregation as they chose 7 men of good reputation to serve the physical needs of the church. The selection of the deacons, much like the elders, should be a slow process. In particular, the deacons are to be tested over a period of time before they can actually hold the office. That time of testing should at least be a year or more in the making. Now, the last thing we're going to cover in relation to church government is the forms of church government and what Scripture says about who governs the church and how it's done. Clearly, it is Christ's church. He is the head of the church, but God does establish earthly authority in Scripture. Now, there are generally 3 forms of church government that we're going to see today, with some of that we see existing today, with some variety in how each one actually is practiced between the churches and denominations. We'll call these 3 forms: 1, the Episcopalian government; 2, the Presbyterian government; and 3, the congregational government. We're going to look at these in a very broad sense today, so bear that in mind. Much more could be added on any of these specifically. So first, we have the Episcopalian. So the Episcopalian system gives final authority to an archbishop who presides over other bishops with lesser authority who preside over various local churches in a single area. They call these a diocese. So these can be, the case for this can be made is that the apostles were given authority over churches, and so their successors, those who came after them, who were also seen as bishops, will have that same authority, will do the same thing. This form of government was increasingly used in the 2nd century and continues on today. We see forms of this in the Episcopalian Church, and we also see a more hierarchical form with more levels of it in the Roman Catholic Church. Next is the Presbyterian. So the Presbyterian system gives final authority to a group of elders, i.e. a general assembly, which presides over other elder groups, which are called synods or presbyteries, with lesser authority all the way down to elders of a local church. These are called sessions. These elders serve as representatives of the church. The case made for this system is derived from certain principles and scriptures, such as the authority given to elders in Hebrews 13:17. Obey your leaders and submit to them, for they keep watch over your souls as those who will give an account. Let them do this with joy and not with grief, for this should be profitable for you. Along with that, conventional wisdom of cooperating with other churches is also a reason why they employ this method. If you have multiple sessions, the logic is if you have multiple sessions under the same synod or presbytery, they can work more easily together and cooperate with each other more easily. Then, lastly, there is the congregational. So the congregational system leaves each local church autonomous from other local churches. The authority for her affairs, that church's affairs, is left with that church as a whole. The responsibility of discipline and doctrine finally lies within the congregation. So while the Episcopalian and Presbyterian models are practiced by others, we at Calvary, in the Calvary family of churches, we believe that congregationalism is the most biblical form of government that the Bible, biblical form of government for local churches. In the New Testament, congregations are specifically given the responsibility to rule on matters such as disputes between members, matters of doctrine, matters of church discipline, and matters of church membership. If we look at the letters written to the New Testament, most of the letters were not written to church leaders, but they were written to the church. The idea that there is a priesthood of believers within the church strongly suggests the church is directly under Christ rather than a hierarchy of bishops between. So where does the biblical office of elder fit within the congregational system? Well, while we see many examples of the local church being the final court of appeals in areas of discipline and doctrine, we also see exhortations for the church to obey her leaders, her leaders who are the elders. The elders are not given the final rule, though, but they are to lead the church by providing insight, oversight, teaching, and prayer. So in conclusion, to sum up Calvary is a church led by a plurality of elders and is congregationally approved. So that's a quick teaching, or that's a summary of the teaching of the doctrine of church governments. When you're done, take some notes with this and put them on down, and we'll meet together in class and discuss it further. Thank you for your time, and God bless.